She was the queen. He was the target. She came for the final, lethal blow. They had a secret past, a hidden child. She didn't know his true name. He thought she was dead. She held the poison. He held the boy. The chain told the truth. What happened next changed everything. Welcome back. Today, we're diving into the full story of the waitress queen sent to kill a Korean mafia boss, who stopped everything when she realized the crying boy was her son. A lethal mission, a secret family, and a desperate fight to survive. Grab your seat, hit that subscribe button, and let's get started. The coffee machine hissed behind Lena like a serpent preparing to strike, but her hands remained steady as she wiped down the counter for the third time that hour. Through the cafe's rain-streaked window, Seoul's neon lights bled into the wet pavement, turning the street into a canvas of blurred reds and blues. Beautiful. Deceptive. Just like her. Elsa, table 7 needs water, Manager Kim called from the kitchen, his voice cutting through the quiet jazz that filled the nearly empty cafe. Lena, no, Elsa here, nodded with the practiced smile of a woman who had worn 1,000 faces. The silver tray felt light in her hands, lighter than the Beretta hidden in her apartment 3 blocks away. Lighter than the 8 years of guilt she carried like stones in her chest. Tonight, she would finally be free. She moved between the tables with fluid grace, her server's uniform, a simple black dress and white apron, disguising the lethal precision of a woman who'd orchestrated the fall of 3 rival syndicates across Europe. The Global Council had given her this assignment 6 months ago: infiltrate, observe, and eliminate Yeongguk Park, the rising dragon of Seoul's underworld whose expansion threatened their carefully maintained balance of power. It had taken her 4 months to get hired at this cafe. 2 more months to learn his patterns. Every Wednesday at 9 p.m., he came here with his inner circle, sitting at the corner booth where the security cameras had convenient blind spots. Where the emergency exit was exactly 43 steps away. Where a clean shot through the kitchen would give her 7 seconds before anyone could react. Tonight was Wednesday. The door chimed. Lena's pulse didn't quicken. She'd trained herself beyond such amateur reactions, but every nerve in her body aligned like an orchestra preparing for its final crescendo. He entered first. Yeongguk Park. Even without the intelligence photos, she would have known him by the way he carried himself, shoulders back, eyes scanning, a predator comfortable in his territory. Tailored black suit. Dark hair swept back. The kind of face that belonged on magazine covers if those magazines celebrated beautiful monsters. But it was the small hand clutching his that made Lena's careful composure fracture. A boy. Perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with Yeongguk's dark hair but softer features, like someone had taken the sharp edges of his father and smoothed them into something innocent. The child's eyes were puffy and red, fresh tears still clinging to his lashes. "Papa, I don't want to," the boy whispered in Korean, his voice small and broken. Yeongguk crouched down, his dangerous exterior melting into something Lena didn't expect: tenderness. "Gina, I know it's hard. But we talked about this. We have to keep going, even when it hurts. Your Yama would want you to be strong." The boy Gae-jin nodded, but his chin trembled. Lena's hand tightened on the water pitcher. She forced her feet to move, forced air into lungs that suddenly felt too tight. Focus. He's a target. The boy is collateral context. You've done harder things. But she hadn't. And she knew it. She approached their booth, painted smile in place. "Good evening. Welcome to." The words died in her throat. Jean had looked up at her, and there, hanging against his small chest, catching the cafe's amber light, was a silver chain. Not just any chain. That chain. The one with the tiny engraved cross, the Italian inscription on the back that read, "Sei il mio cuore," "You are my heart." The chain she'd bought in a small Roman shop on the happiest day of her life. The chain she'd fastened around a tiny neck 8 years ago, her tears falling onto a blue blanket as she left her newborn son on a stranger's doorstep. The chain that was supposed to be in Singapore, where she'd carefully researched and confirmed that Alex Chen, the kind antique dealer she'd had a brief, passionate affair with, had moved for a better life. The pitcher slipped. Water cascaded across the table. "I'm so sorry," Lena gasped, grabbing napkins with shaking hands that had never shaken, not even when she'd stared down the barrel of a rival's gun. Young-guk was speaking, probably something polite and dismissive, but Lena couldn't hear him. Her eyes locked on Jin's face, really seeing him now. The slope of his nose. The curve of his lips. The way his left eyebrow arched slightly higher than his right. Her eyebrow. Her nose. But those eyes, those were his father's. Miss, it's all right," Young-guk said, his voice closer now, concerned. Lena looked up at him, at Alex, at the man she'd loved for 3 desperate weeks in a city where they'd both been pretending to be someone else. At the man whose real name was Young-guk Park. At the man she'd been sent to kill. At the father of her son. The cafe spun. The jazz played on. And somewhere in the kitchen, the poison she'd prepared, tasteless, untraceable, perfect, waited in a small vial tucked behind the espresso cups. What would you do if you discovered the person you were sent to destroy was connected to you in the most devastating way? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. Lena barely remembered cleaning up the spilled water. Muscle memory carried her through the motions, dabbing napkins, murmuring apologies, retreating to the kitchen where Manager Kim scolded her with the exasperation of a man who'd never imagined his clumsy waitress was mentally calculating 17 different escape routes. Her hands found the cold metal of the sink's edge. She gripped it hard enough to hurt, anchoring herself to reality because reality had just shattered into pieces she didn't know how to reassemble. 8 years ago. Rome. The memory arrived unbidden, as vivid as the day she'd lived it. She'd been Elena Rossi then, a junior art consultant taking a brief vacation from her real work, eliminating a corrupt politician who'd been skimming from the European syndicate's operations. She'd planned to stay invisible, to enjoy 3 weeks of anonymity in a city where no one knew her face or her sins. Then she'd met Alex in a tiny gallery near the Trevi Fountain. He'd been standing in front of a Byzantine cross, his profile sharp against the afternoon light streaming through ancient windows. When he'd turned and smiled at her, something in Lena's carefully constructed armor had cracked. They'd talked for hours. About art, about history, about nothing and everything. He'd said he was an antique dealer from Singapore, in Rome acquiring pieces for wealthy clients. She should have known better. She did know better. But for 3 weeks, she'd let herself believe in the fantasy. She'd let herself fall in love with a man who touched her like she was precious, who laughed at her terrible jokes, who made her feel human instead of the weapon the syndicate had forged. They'd made love in his hotel room overlooking the Tiber, and for the first time in her life, Lena had felt safe. Then reality had crashed back. Her handler had called. New mission. Immediate extraction. No time for goodbyes. She'd left while Alex slept, taking nothing but the memory of his heartbeat against her cheek and a promise to herself that she'd find him again when her life was different, cleaner, possible. 2 months later, she'd discovered she was pregnant. The syndicate had procedures for such complications. Clean. Efficient. Erasing problems before they became liabilities. But when Lena had felt that first flutter of movement inside her, she'd made a decision that terrified her more than any mission. She would have this baby. She would give him the life she'd never had. She would save at least one innocent thing from the darkness that consumed her. She'd disappeared for 7 months, using every favor and false identity she'd accumulated. She'd given birth alone in a Budapest safe house, holding her son for 6 precious hours before the reality of her world became impossible to ignore. A child couldn't survive in her life. The enemies she'd made would use him as leverage, as a weapon against her. He would grow up running, hiding, watching his mother kill to keep them both alive until inevitably, someone would kill them both. So she'd researched Alex Chen obsessively. She'd confirmed his move to Singapore, his stable antique business, his clean record. He was kind. Safe. Normal. Everything she wasn't. She'd wrapped Jean in the blue blanket her own mother had abandoned her in, the only possession from her past she'd kept, and she'd fastened the silver chain around his tiny neck. Inside the blanket, she'd tucked a note written in shaking handwriting. His name is Jean. He is yours. I cannot keep him safe, but you can. Please love him enough for both of us. E. She'd left him on Alex's doorstep in Singapore at dawn, watching from across the street until he'd opened the door and found the bundle. She'd watched him lift Jean with trembling hands, watched him read the note, watched his face transform with wonder and terror and instant, absolute love. Then she'd walked away and returned to being Lena Volkov, the Mafia queen who felt nothing, feared nothing, sacrificed everything. Except she'd sacrificed wrong. Alex Chen wasn't an antique dealer. He was Yeongguk Park, and instead of Singapore, he'd apparently taken Jean back to Seoul. The life she'd thought was safe was a beautiful lie, just like the life she'd pretended to live in Rome. Elsa? Table 7 is asking for their menus. Manager Kim's voice snapped her back. Lena straightened, smoothing her apron with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Through the kitchen's service window, she could see Yeongguk and Jean at their booth. Her son was wiping his eyes. Her target was holding a menu but watching the boy with such fierce protectiveness that something in Lena's chest twisted painfully. She'd spent 8 years believing Jean was safe. 8 years of brutal missions justified by the knowledge that at least one person she'd loved had escaped her poison. But he hadn't escaped. He'd landed directly in the crosshairs of the same world that had destroyed her. And now the Global Council wanted her to make Jean an orphan. Lena's hand moved to her pocket where her phone waited. One message to her handler: mission compromised. Extraction required. She'd be reassigned. Someone else would complete the kill. Jean would lose his father, but at least Lena wouldn't be the one to pull the trigger. But someone else wouldn't care that Jean had been crying. Someone else wouldn't hesitate. Through the window, she watched Yeongguk cup Jin's face gently, saying something that made the boy's expression soften. Lena pulled her hand from her pocket, leaving the phone untouched. She picked up 2 menus and walked back into the dining room, no longer certain whether she was walking toward her greatest mission or her complete destruction. Lena placed the menus on the table with a steadiness that betrayed none of the chaos screaming through her mind. Up close, Jean was even more heartbreaking, his small hands folded in his lap, his shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller, invisible. "Can I get you something to drink while you decide?" Her voice came out perfectly pleasant, perfectly forgettable. Yeongguk glanced up, and for a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Something flickered in his expression: recognition? Impossible. She'd changed her hair color, wore colored contacts, had even altered her walk. Alex had known a blonde with green eyes who moved like a dancer. Elsa was a brunette with brown eyes who shuffled like someone who'd never left Seoul. "Juice for him," Yeongguk said in Korean, his voice a smooth baritone that sent unwanted memories cascading through Lena's carefully compartmentalized mind. "Coffee for me." "Black." Jean said nothing, just traced patterns on the table with one small finger. Lena nodded and retreated, her server's smile firmly in place. Behind the espresso machine, she prepared the coffee with mechanical precision while her mind raced through impossible calculations. The vial of poison was in her apron pocket. She could complete the mission in the next 20 minutes. She could walk away and let the council send someone else. She could. The cafe door chimed again. 3 men entered. Lena's trained eye catalogued them instantly. Leather jackets despite the warm evening, bulges at their waistlines poorly concealed, eyes that swept the room with predatory focus before landing on Yeongguk's booth. Not Global Council. Different organization. Local. The tallest one, scarred lip, dragon tattoo creeping up his neck, smiled with too many teeth. His companions flanked him as they approached Yeongguk's table. Park Yoongguk, Dragon Tattoo said, his Korean thick with Busan dialect. You're far from Gangnam tonight. Yoongguk's posture didn't change, but Lena saw his hand move subtly to cover Jin's. Gentlemen. I'm having dinner with my son. Perhaps we can schedule a meeting. We tried scheduling. Your people don't return calls. Dragon Tattoo's smile widened. So we figured we'd catch you somewhere, informal. Manager Kim had gone very still behind the register. The only other customers, an elderly couple, were already gathering their things with the practiced urgency of people who recognize trouble. Lena's mind calculated angles, trajectories, outcomes. 3 armed men. Yoongguk likely armed but encumbered by Jin. Innocent civilians. Too many variables, all of them ending with Jin in the crossfire. She moved without thinking. Excuse me, sir? Lena approached Dragon Tattoo with a tray holding a single coffee cup. You need to order if you're going to. She stumbled. The scalding coffee arced through the air, splashing across Dragon Tattoo's chest. He roared, stumbling backward. His companions lunged forward reflexively, toward Lena, away from Yoongguk. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Lena cried, grabbing napkins, positioning herself between the men and Yoongguk's booth. Please, let me help. Stupid bitch. Dragon Tattoo shoved her hard. Lena let herself fall, crashing into a table with enough noise to justify Manager Kim finally calling the police. But in those crucial seconds, Yoongguk had moved. He'd pulled Jin behind him and risen to his feet, his jacket falling open just enough to reveal what Lena's trained eye already knew, a shoulder holster, and inside it, a promise of violence. You have 10 seconds to leave, Yoongguk said quietly. His voice hadn't raised, but something in it made Dragon Tattoo stop dabbing at his coffee-stained shirt. The calculation happened in real time across Dragon Tattoo's face. 3 against 1, but the one was Yoongguk Park, and they were in his city, in a public place that was about to fill with police. This isn't finished, Dragon Tattoo spat. But he was already backing toward the door, his companions following. They left. Manager Kim was on the phone with police. The elderly couple had vanished. Lena lay on the floor, feigning disorientation while her mind processed what she'd just done. She'd blown her cover. She'd revealed capabilities no clumsy waitress should possess. She'd saved her target. She'd saved Jin's father. Strong hands gripped her shoulders. Yoongguk knelt beside her, his face close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, eyes she'd once memorized by candlelight in Rome. Are you hurt? He asked. Behind him, Jin watched with wide, frightened eyes, one small hand clutching the silver chain at his throat. I'm fine, Lena managed. I'm so sorry, I'm just clumsy. No. Yoongguk's grip tightened fractionally. His eyes narrowed, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're not clumsy at all. That was a tactical deflection. Professional grade. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced confusion onto her face. I don't understand. Who are you? Yoongguk's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Really? The sound of sirens grew closer. Jin started crying again, soft hiccuping sobs that tore through Lena's chest. Papa, I want to go home, the boy whimpered. Yoongguk's expression softened marginally. He released Lena and turned to his son, but not before she saw the question still burning in his eyes. He knew something was wrong. And now he'd be watching. Lena had just traded her perfect assassination opportunity for her son's temporary safety, and in doing so, she'd painted a target on her own back. The police took statements. Manager Kim fussed over the broken dishes. Yoongguk and Jin left through the back exit with 2 men in dark suits who'd materialized from nowhere, bodyguards, Lena realized, who'd been stationed outside. She gave her statement as Elsa Choi, clumsy waitress, wrong place at wrong time. The officers seemed satisfied. Manager Kim was less so. You're fired, he said flatly after the police left. I can't have this kind of trouble. Pack your things. Lena nodded meekly, relief flooding through her. She needed distance, needed time to think, needed. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You were impressive tonight. I'd like to thank you properly. YP. A second message followed immediately, an address in Gangnam. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Lena stared at the screen. Yongguk Park didn't thank people. He eliminated loose ends. This was either genuine gratitude or a trap, and she couldn't afford to ignore either possibility. She deleted the messages and left through the staff entrance, immediately checking for tails. 3 blocks away, she ducked into a subway station and made 4 train changes before arriving at her apartment, a sparse studio in Hongdae that contained nothing personal, nothing real. Inside, she pulled out her secure laptop and opened an encrypted channel. Her handler's face appeared on screen within seconds. Report. Victor's Russian accent was as cold as Moscow winter. Target acquired. Patterns confirmed. Complications arose? What complications? Lena's mind raced. Local rival faction attempted a move on the target. Public location. I intervened to maintain cover. Victor's pale eyes narrowed. You intervened to save him? To preserve the mission timeline, Lena corrected smoothly. A gang execution would have triggered immediate lockdown protocols. Our window would have closed. Silence. Then, you have 72 hours. After that, we send alternative assets. The screen went dark. 72 hours until another assassin arrived. 72 hours until Jean became collateral damage in someone else's clean kill. Lena's hands trembled as she opened a locked drawer and pulled out a faded photograph, the only one she'd kept. Jean at 3 hours old, wrinkled and perfect, sleeping in her arms during those stolen 6 hours before she'd destroyed both their lives by trying to save his. I'm sorry, she thought, tracing his tiny face with one finger. I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to keep you safe. But maybe she could be strong enough now. The address Yongguk had sent led to an upscale restaurant in Gangnam, the kind where politicians and CEOs made deals over $100 steaks. Lena arrived in a simple dress, Elsa's wardrobe, not her own, and was immediately escorted to a private room. Yongguk stood when she entered. He'd traded his suit for a black dress shirt and slacks, and without the cafe's harsh lighting, Lena could see the faint scar along his jawline that hadn't existed 8 years ago. Battle wounds from a life that had clearly been anything but safe. Miss Choi. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure I should, Lena admitted, letting Elsa's nervousness show. After last night. Last night you prevented what could have been a very ugly situation. Yongguk gestured to a chair. Please. Sit. She did. He poured tea with movements that were almost meditative, and Lena found herself watching his hands, hands she'd once memorized, hands that had touched her with reverence and hunger. You said you wanted to thank me, she prompted. I do. But I also want to understand you. Yongguk's eyes met hers, and there was that intensity again, that predator's focus. You moved like someone with training last night. Military? Police? I took self-defense classes, Lena said. After an incident. Years ago. He didn't sound convinced. And the way you positioned yourself? The angle of deflection? That was instinct? Lucky coincidence. I don't believe in luck. Yongguk leaned back, studying her. I believe in patterns. Preparation. People being exactly who they've trained themselves to be. Lena's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression open, confused. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Park. Yongguk, he corrected softly. And I think you're much more than that. The door opened. Jean entered, followed by an older man in an expensive suit, Mr. Han, Lena recognized from her surveillance photos. Yoongguk's consigliere and right hand. Papa, you said we could get ice cream after, Jin said, his voice brighter than last night but still carrying an undertone of sadness. We will, Gina. First, say hello to Miss Choi. She's the brave lady who helped us yesterday. Jin turned to Lena, and up close, in good lighting, the resemblance was undeniable. Her nose. Her smile. Even the way he tilted his head slightly when curious. Thank you for helping, Jin said politely, bowing. Lena's throat closed. She bowed back, not trusting her voice. Mr. Han was watching her with hawk eyes. Miss Choi. I took the liberty of running a background check. Your employment history is interesting. Lena's mind went into overdrive. Her cover identity was solid, built by the syndicate's best. But Mr. Han hadn't stayed alive in Seoul's underworld by accepting surface information. Interesting how? Yoongguk asked, his tone sharpening. Gaps, Mr. Han said simply. Periods where Miss Choi seems to have vanished entirely. And her references, while legitimate on paper, are convenient. Yoongguk's expression shifted. The warmth vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who'd built an empire on never trusting blindly. Miss Choi, he said quietly. I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you? Really? Jean was watching her with those innocent eyes. Mr. Han's hand had moved subtly toward his jacket. The room suddenly felt very small. Lena had seconds to decide, maintain cover and risk immediate execution, or pivot to a partial truth that might buy her time. My name is Elsa, she said carefully. But you're right. I wasn't always a waitress. The silence stretched like a blade being slowly drawn from its sheath. Jean looked between the adults, sensing tension he was too young to understand. Mr. Han's hand remained near his weapon. Yoongguk's eyes had gone flat and dangerous. Gina, Yoongguk said softly, never taking his gaze from Lena. Go with Mr. Han. Get your ice cream. I'll meet you in 10 minutes. But Papa? Now. The authority in that single word was absolute. Jin's face crumpled slightly, but he obeyed, taking Mr. Han's offered hand. The older man shot Lena a look that promised violence if she moved wrong, then guided the boy out. The door clicked shut. Yoongguk stood in one fluid motion, crossing the space between them before Lena could react. His hand locked around her wrist, not bruising, but inescapable, and he pulled her to her feet. The truth, he said, his voice deadly quiet. All of it. You have 30 seconds before I call Mr. Han back. Lena's mind raced through scenarios. She could fight, she'd win, but it would confirm everything he suspected. She could run, but she'd never see Jean again. She could lie, but his eyes told her he'd see through anything less than truth. I'm a cleaner, she said finally. For a European organization. I was sent here 6 months ago. Sent to do what? To observe you. To report on your operations. And? His grip tightened fractionally. And to kill you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Yoongguk's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, not surprise, she realized. Confirmation. When? Last night. At the cafe. I had everything ready. Lena met his gaze steadily. Then those men came in, and I chose to save you instead. Why? Because, she stopped, the truth too dangerous, too impossible. Yoongguk released her wrist and stepped back, but his hand moved to his jacket. When it emerged, he held a gun, not pointed at her, but ready. Professional courtesy between killers. Lena Volkov, he said, and her real name on his lips sent ice through her veins. The Mafia Queen. The European syndicate's most efficient asset. 23 confirmed eliminations, though the real number is probably double that. His smile was cold. Did you think I wouldn't eventually figure out who you were? I've had your face, your real face, on my radar for 2 years. I just couldn't understand why you'd be working as a waitress in my city. Then why let me get close? Because I wanted to know what you wanted. And because, his voice caught, just barely. Because when I saw you that first night, something felt familiar. Impossible, but familiar. Lena's heart hammered. Young-guk. Don't. He raised the gun slightly. Don't say my name like you know me. Like we're anything other than what we are, predator and prey. Except I can't figure out which of us is which. Neither can I, Lena whispered. So I'll ask you again, why did you save me? The truth this time. This was it. The moment where everything either shattered or somehow, impossibly, began to make sense. Lena reached slowly into her pocket. Young-guk tensed, gun rising, but she moved carefully, pulling out not a weapon but her phone. She opened her photos, the hidden folder, encrypted, containing the only piece of her past she'd allowed herself to keep. She turned the screen toward him. The photograph showed a younger Lena, blonde and glowing, holding a newborn baby. The timestamp read 8 years ago. And wrapped around the infant's neck was a silver chain with a distinctive engraved cross. Young-guk stared at the image. His gun hand lowered slowly. Rome, Lena said quietly. 8 years ago. You called yourself Alex Chen. I was Elena Rossi. We had 3 weeks together before my life called me back. Her voice cracked. I found out I was pregnant 2 months later. I spent 7 months searching for you, but all my intelligence said you'd moved to Singapore. So I took him there. I left him on your doorstep because I thought you were an antique dealer who could give him a safe, normal life. Young-guk's face had gone pale. The baby. The note. That was. Jean is our son. Lena's eyes burned. I came here to kill you, not knowing you were Alex. Not knowing you'd brought him back to Seoul. Not knowing, her voice broke completely. Not knowing that the safest thing I ever did was put him in the hands of one of the most dangerous men in Asia. The gun fell from Young-guk's hand, clattering on the floor. You're Elena, he whispered. You're Jin's mother. His knees seemed to give out. He caught himself against the table. All this time, I thought she was dead. I thought some tragedy had forced her to give him up. I've been looking for you for 8 years. And I've been running from everyone for 8 years, Lena said. Including you. They stared at each other across 3 feet of space that felt like an ocean. 2 killers, 2 liars, 2 people who'd loved each other once without knowing the truth of who they were. Does your organization know? Young-guk asked finally. About Jean? No. About you being his father? I just found out 2 nights ago, when I saw the chain. And now? Now I have 72 hours before they send someone else to finish what I couldn't. Lena's hands clenched into fists. Someone who won't hesitate. Someone who won't care that Jean will be watching. Young-guk's jaw tightened. He bent, retrieved his gun, and looked at her with eyes that held too many emotions to name. Then we have 72 hours to figure out how to keep our son from becoming an orphan, he said. Again. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew? Share your story below. Let's talk about those life-altering moments. Young-guk made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, his voice clipped and authoritative. Within 20 minutes, Lena found herself in an armored SUV, cutting through Seoul's nighttime traffic toward a compound in the hills outside the city. We need to secure Jean first, Young-guk said, not looking at her. Then we plan. Lena nodded, her mind still reeling. Everything felt surreal, sitting beside the man she'd loved, the man she'd been sent to kill, racing toward the child she thought she'd never see again. Does he know? She asked quietly. About being adopted? Young-guk's jaw tightened. I've told him his mother loved him very much but couldn't keep him safe. That she made the bravest choice she could. His eyes finally met hers. I didn't lie. The compound was fortress-like, high walls, security cameras, armed guards at every checkpoint. Inside, the main house was surprisingly warm, decorated with children's drawings and photographs. Jin's life, documented in frames. Jin's birthday parties. Jin's first day of school. Jin learning to ride a bike, Yoongguk's hands steady on the seat. 8 years of moments Lena had missed. Papa. Jin ran toward them from a sitting room where Mr. Han had apparently been entertaining him. Did you finish your boring meeting? Can we? He stopped, seeing Lena. Oh. Hello again, Miss Choi. Gina, Yoongguk crouched down, his voice gentle. Miss Choi is going to stay with us for a few days. There are some bad people who might try to hurt Papa, and she's going to help keep us safe. Jin's eyes widened. Like a bodyguard? That's so cool. Then his expression fell. Are the bad people coming soon? Not if we're smart, Yoongguk said, ruffling his hair. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that? Jin nodded, clutching his silver chain, a habit, Lena realized, when he was nervous. Mr. Han approached, his expression grave. Sir, we have a problem. I just received intel from our sources. There's chatter about a high-level contractor arriving in Seoul. They're calling him the Ghost. Lena's blood turned to ice. When? Mr. Han's eyes narrowed at her. Tomorrow. Maybe sooner. He turned to Yoongguk. If the syndicate is sending the Ghost, they're not playing games. He's never failed a contract. Neither had I, Lena said quietly. Until now. Yoongguk stood, his hand instinctively moving to Jin's shoulder. Security protocols. Full lockdown. No one in or out without my direct authorization. Already implementing, Mr. Han said. But his eyes kept darting to Lena with undisguised suspicion. Sir, with respect, keeping the enemy inside our walls. She's not the enemy, Yoongguk cut him off. She was sent to kill you. And she didn't. That makes her an ally. His tone brooked no argument. Brief the security team. Now. Mr. Han left, reluctance evident in every step. Jin tugged on Yoongguk's sleeve. Papa, I'm scared. I know, Gina. Yoongguk lifted him easily. But you're safe here. I promise. It was a promise Lena knew he couldn't keep. The Ghost didn't breach defenses, he became part of them, a shadow inside shadows. He could be anyone, a guard, a delivery person, a gardener. By the time you saw him, you were already dead. She'd worked with him once, in Prague. She'd watched him eliminate a target surrounded by 12 bodyguards without firing a single shot. Poison in the ventilation system. Everyone dead within 10 minutes. Yoongguk, she said urgently. The compound's ventilation. An alarm shrieked through the house. Yoongguk's face went hard. He thrust Jin toward Lena. Safe room. 3rd floor, end of the hall. Code is 0-8-1-5. Go. Now. What about you? I'll handle this. Protect him. His eyes met hers, and in them, she saw 8 years of love for the child they'd made. Please. Lena grabbed Jin and ran. Behind her, gunfire erupted. They made it to the 3rd floor as explosions rocked the compound's east wing. Jin was crying, his small body trembling against her as she punched in the code. The safe room door was reinforced steel, designed to withstand anything. Except it wouldn't open. Lena tried again. Wrong code. The system had been compromised. Mama? Jin whispered, the words slipping out in his terror. I'm scared. Lena's heart stopped. He'd called her Mama. Somehow, on some level, he knew. It's okay, baby, she whispered back, pulling him close as footsteps echoed in the hallway. I've got you. The lights went out. In the darkness, Lena heard it, the whisper of fabric, the barely there exhale of someone who'd learned to breathe like the dead. The ghost was here. And Lena was trapped in a hallway with only her bare hands and her body between the world's most efficient killer and her son. Through the compound, she heard young Guk shouting orders, heard more gunfire, heard the chaos of a fortress falling. Jean pressed his face into her shoulder, sobbing silently. Lena kissed the top of his head, maybe the first time, maybe the last time, and prepared to die the way she should have died 8 years ago, protecting the only pure thing she'd ever created. A shadow moved at the end of the hallway. "Hello, Lena," the ghost said in a voice like gravel and smoke. "The council sends their regards." The ghost moved like water in darkness, but Lena had fought in shadows before. She pushed Jean behind her, feeling his small hands fist in her shirt. "You failed your contract," the ghost continued, his silhouette barely visible. "Disappointing. I expected better from the Queen." "I had new information," Lena said, buying time, calculating distances. "The target isn't who the council thinks. The council doesn't care." A flash of metal. "They only care about results." He lunged. Lena moved on pure instinct, shoving Jean toward the nearest doorway. "Run." The ghost's blade whistled past her throat, missing by millimeters. She caught his wrist, twisted, drove her knee toward his solar plexus. He absorbed the blow and countered with an elbow that cracked against her ribs. Pain exploded through her side, but Lena used the momentum, spinning away and putting herself between the ghost and the doorway where Jean had disappeared. "Impressive," the ghost said. "But you're protecting the child. That makes you predictable." He feinted left, went right. Lena blocked, but he was faster, his blade opening a line of fire across her shoulder. Blood soaked through her sleeve. "Mama!" Jin's scream came from inside the room. The distraction cost her. The ghost's fist connected with her jaw, sending her sprawling. Stars burst across her vision. She tasted copper. The ghost stepped over her, heading for Jean. "No." Lena's hand found a shard of broken glass from a shattered picture frame, Jin's school photo, she realized distantly. She drove the glass into the ghost's calf with everything she had left. He howled, stumbling. It gave her 3 seconds. She rolled to her feet, grabbed a marble bust from a side table, and brought it down on the ghost's head with brutal efficiency. He crumpled. Not dead, she could see him breathing, but unconscious. Lena sagged against the wall, her vision swimming. Her shoulder was bleeding heavily, her ribs screaming. But Jean was alive. "Lena." Youngguk's voice, raw and desperate, echoed up the stairwell. "Third floor," she called back, her voice weaker than she'd intended. He appeared seconds later, clothes torn, face bloodied, gun in hand. Behind him, Mr. Han limped, supporting his weight. The compound had clearly taken heavy damage. Youngguk's eyes found her, then the ghost's unconscious form, then the blood soaking her sleeve. "Jean?" "Safe. In there." Lena gestured weakly. Youngguk moved past her, disappearing into the room. She heard Jin sobbing, heard Youngguk's low murmurs of comfort. Mr. Han studied her with new eyes. "You saved him." "He's my son," Lena said simply. "Yes," Mr. Han said quietly. "I see that now." He glanced at the ghost. "We need to move. If they sent him, they'll send others." Youngguk emerged carrying Jean, who clung to him like a lifeline. But the boy's eyes were on Lena. "You're bleeding," Jean whispered. "I'm okay," Lena lied. "You called her Mama," Youngguk said gently to Jean. "Did you know?" Jean shook his head. "It just felt right. When I was scared, I wanted my mama, and she was there." He looked between them with eyes too old for his age. "Is she my mama?" Youngguk's throat worked. He looked at Lena, a question in his eyes. Lena nodded, tears finally breaking free. "Yes, baby. I'm your mama." I've always been your mama. Then why did you leave? The question cut deeper than the ghost's blade. Lena moved closer, ignoring the pain screaming through her body. She cupped Jin's face with her uninjured hand. Because I thought leaving was how I'd keep you safe, she whispered. But I was wrong. I should have stayed and fought for you. I should have been braver. You fought the scary man, Jin said. That was brave. Something in Lena's chest cracked open. I'll keep fighting, she promised. For you. Always. Sir, Mr. Han interrupted urgently. The East Wing is compromised. We have maybe an hour before the council sends reinforcements. Yoongguk's jaw set. Then we don't run. We end this. He looked at Lena. The council wants me dead. They want you dead for failing. But what they don't want is exposure. Understanding dawned in Lena's eyes. We have the ghost. We have proof of an international assassination attempt on Korean soil. And I have connections to every major news outlet in Asia, Yoongguk continued. We make this public. We burn the council's operation so thoroughly they'll have to retreat or face international scrutiny they can't survive. It's risky, Mr. Han warned. Everything's risky, Yoongguk said. He looked at Jin, then at Lena. But for the first time in 8 years, I have everything worth fighting for. Lena met his eyes and saw the man she'd fallen for in Rome, but stronger now, forged by the same fires that had tempered her. Then let's fight, she said. The next 6 hours moved with surgical precision. Mr. Han secured the ghost in the compound's reinforced detention cell while Lena, despite her injuries, worked alongside Yoongguk to compile evidence. Her insider knowledge of the Global Council's structure combined with his documented proof of the attack created an explosive narrative, a European criminal syndicate attempting political assassination on Korean soil. Here, Lena said, pulling up encrypted files on her secure laptop. Communication logs between Victor and council leadership. Dates, locations, payment transfers for 17 contracts across Asia. Including mine. Yoongguk leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent from Rome, achingly familiar. This proves systematic operations. Not just one rogue hit. It proves they've been destabilizing Asian markets for profit. Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard. Your expansion threatened their control. You weren't just a target, you were the first domino. Then we make sure they fall instead, Yoongguk said grimly. By dawn, they had everything packaged, documents, recordings, the ghost's interrogation, conducted with professional efficiency by Mr. Han, and security footage of the compound attack. Yoongguk made calls to journalists he'd cultivated over years, not bought, but respected. People who'd jump at a story this big. It's ready, he said finally, his hand hovering over the send button. Once this goes out, there's no taking it back. The council will burn, but we'll be exposed too. Every intelligence agency on the planet will want to talk to us. We'll be legitimate targets, Lena agreed. But we'll be alive. Jin will be alive. Their eyes met. In the dim light of the study, with Jin sleeping upstairs under heavy guard, they looked like what they were, two people who'd built kingdoms of blood trying to create something clean for the child they loved. Together? Yoongguk asked. Together, Lena confirmed. He pressed send. The response was instantaneous. Within 30 minutes, news alerts started firing across global networks. Within an hour, the story had gone viral, complete with leaked documents, video evidence, and testimony from the ghost himself, who'd negotiated immunity by turning on his employers. The European syndicate's carefully maintained shadows were flooded with light. Lena's phone exploded with messages. Threats, mostly. But also panic from her former colleagues as the council's infrastructure began collapsing under international pressure. Victor's call came at 7 a.m. You've destroyed everything, his voice crackled with rage. Decades of work, burned because you couldn't complete one simple contract. It wasn't simple, Lena said calmly. And it was never right. You'll die for this. You and your bastard child, Anne. Young-guk took the phone from her hand. Viktor Sokolov. I've just sent your personal financial records to Interpol. Your safe houses in Prague, Vienna, and Moscow are currently being raided. And the warrant for your arrest is being processed as we speak. His smile was cold. You're finished. He ended the call and crushed the phone under his heel. That felt good, he admitted. Despite everything, Lena laughed, a broken, relieved sound that turned into tears. Young-guk pulled her close, careful of her bandaged shoulder, and she let herself collapse against him for the first time in 8 years. We did it, she whispered. We survived, he corrected. Now comes the hard part. The hard part arrived in the form of Korean National Intelligence, Interpol, and the FBI, all of whom descended on the compound by noon. Young-guk's lawyers, an army of them, negotiated immunity deals in exchange for testimony. His legitimate business holdings provided cover. Lena's cooperation and evidence secured her protection. It wasn't perfect. They'd spend years looking over their shoulders. But the council's leadership was in custody, their operations dismantled, and the threat to Jean had been neutralized. Papa? Mama? Jean appeared in the study doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Why are there so many cars outside? Lena and Young-guk exchanged glances. Then Lena knelt, ignoring the pull of her stitches, and opened her arms. Jean walked into them without hesitation. We're going to have some visitors, Lena explained gently. People who want to make sure everyone is safe. It might be scary, but Papa and I will be right here. Are the bad people gone? Yes, baby. The bad people are gone. Jean looked up at Young-guk, then back at Lena. And you're staying? You're not leaving again? Lena's throat tightened. She looked at Young-guk, saw the question in his eyes too, the hope, the fear, the desperate want for something neither of them had ever had, family. I'm staying, Lena promised. Forever. Jean threw his arms around her neck. Good. Because I just got my mama. I don't want to lose her. You won't, Young-guk said, his voice rough with emotion. He joined them, wrapping them both in his arms. We're a family now. Nothing will change that. Outside, agents waited with questions. The world still held dangers. But inside this circle of 3, in this moment, they were safe. They were whole. They were finally, impossibly, home. 8 months later. The cafe looked different in autumn light. Golden leaves drifted past the windows where Lena had once stood as a waitress plotting murder. Now she sat at a corner booth, the same booth where everything had changed, watching Jean draw elaborate spaceships in a coloring book. Does this look right, Mama? He held up his picture, tongue poking out in concentration. It's perfect, Lena said, and meant it. Everything he did was perfect, every laugh, every question, every moment she'd been blessed enough to witness these past 8 months. The door chimed. Young-guk entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a suit that made him look more like a CEO than a former crime boss. Which, technically, he was now. Sorry I'm late, he said, sliding into the booth and pressing a kiss to Jin's head, then, still startling in its casualness, to Lena's lips. The board meeting ran long. How did they take the Asian expansion proposal? Lena asked. Approved unanimously. Young-guk's smile was genuine, nothing cold or calculated in it. Park Security Solutions will be operating in 12 countries by next quarter. All legitimate. All clean. It had been Lena's idea, converting his criminal network into a private security empire. His connections became clients. His enforcers became bodyguards. His empire transformed from shadow to light, one strategic move at a time. Lena had done the same with her skill set, consulting for international law enforcement on organized crime. The irony wasn't lost on her. the Mafia queen now helping dismantle the very organizations she'd once served. But redemption, she'd learned, often wore irony like armor. "Mama, when is Teacher Min getting here?" Jean asked. "I want to show her my spelling test. I got all the words right." 10 minutes, Lena checked her watch. "And I'm so proud of you, baby." Jean beamed. He'd struggled initially, 8 years of trauma didn't heal overnight. The nightmares had been frequent, the anxiety overwhelming. But therapy helped. Stability helped. Having 2 parents who loved him unconditionally helped most of all. "There's something I want to show you both," Younguk said, pulling an envelope from his portfolio. It came this morning. Official. Lena opened it, her heart catching as she read. Adoption papers. Final and legal, making her officially Jin's mother in every way that mattered. "I know you already are," Younguk said quietly. "But I wanted it documented. Permanent. So no one could ever question it." Tears blurred Lena's vision. "Younguk. Plus," he continued, pulling out a second envelope with a slight smile, "I thought you might want to make it official in another way too." Inside was a marriage license application, partially filled out. Lena stared at it, then at him. "Are you?" "I'm asking." Younguk took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I loved you in Rome when I didn't know your name. I loved you through 8 years of searching. I loved you when you were sent to kill me." His smile turned tender. "I'd like to love you officially, if you'll have me." "Say yes, Mama." Jean bounced excitedly. "Teacher says married people get to have a big party with cake." Lena laughed through her tears, looking at these 2 people who'd become her entire world. The child she'd tried to save by leaving. The man she'd tried to kill to protect him. The family she'd never thought she deserved. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." Younguk kissed her properly this time, while Jean made exaggerated gagging sounds that turned into giggles. Manager Kim approached their table, the same manager who'd fired Lena 8 months ago, now looking appropriately sheepish. "Mr. Park, Ms. Volkov. Your usual orders?" "Please," Younguk said. "And Manager Kim? Thank you for hiring Elsa back then. Even if she was terrible at waiting tables." "I was not terrible," Lena protested. "You spilled coffee on a gangster. That was strategic." Jean dissolved into laughter, and the sound was sunlight after years of darkness. Later, after Teacher Min arrived and took Jean to his music lesson, Lena and Younguk walked through the neighborhood hand in hand. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of street food and car exhaust and life continuing in all its chaotic beauty. "Do you ever regret it?" Lena asked quietly. "Giving up what you had? The power, the control?" Younguk stopped, turning to face her. "I gave up an empire built on fear," he said. "And I gained a family built on love. There's no comparison. We could still lose everything. The council has remnants. There are people who want revenge. Then we'll face them. Together." He cupped her face gently. "You spent 8 years running because you thought you had to face the world alone. You don't anymore." Lena leaned into his touch, letting herself believe, finally, fully, in the impossible thing they'd built from ashes and secrets and second chances. "I love you," she said. "I loved you as Alex. I love you as Younguk. I love you as Jin's father and my partner and the man who chose to trust me when every instinct told you not to." "I love you too," he said simply. "My queen. My Elena. My Lena. My wife." "Not yet officially," she teased. "Soon enough." They walked back toward the cafe where Jean would be waiting, their hands intertwined, their shadows merging into one on the pavement. Behind them, the past lay quiet and conquered. Ahead, the future waited, uncertain, challenging, beautiful. But they would face it the way they'd faced everything else, together, fierce, and unbreakable. a family forged in fire, tempered by love, and ready for whatever came next. What would you sacrifice for a second chance at happiness? Have you ever had to choose between the life you knew and the life you needed? Share your story, I'd love to hear it. Thank you for joining Lena, Jungkook, and Jean on their journey from darkness to light. If this story of buried secrets and unexpected family resonated with you, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear that truth is always the foundation for a second chance. See you in the next story. Until then, remember that even queens can find redemption.